I'm Agent Morris with the NSA.
We have identified some very, very interesting anomalous type of aircraft.
Traffic is quite luminous and is exhibiting some non-ballistic motion. Over.
Move very rapidly at any speed or whether any direction it wanted to go. Fly could change and go to the right or the left or go crossways without hesitating a bit.
What do you think it was?
Well, if they call it a flying saucer, that's what it is.
EWA 517, do you want to report a UFO? Over. Negative. We don't want to report.
Look, it wasn't my worst Wednesday night.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is another live edition of Anomaly Now, our very first live edition for 2025. It is Wednesday, January 8th, 2025. And this is the weekly live news media roundup for the 501c3 nonprofit Scientific Anomaly Institute, aka the Anomaly Archives, based here in Austin, Texas. I hope you all are doing really well. It's been a fantastic, wild, and crazy holiday season. We survived another year, or at least most of us did. And it's great to be back here in the saddle and talking with you. And hopefully, if you enjoy this program, you'll share it, like, and subscribe, all that fun, silly stuff that the socials like the algorithms to be fed with. And you can find out more about us over at anomalyarchives.org. You can go to our Flipboard and find out more about the Anomaly Archives. Let's see. Yes. Oh, yes. So just briefly, there's a ton of new news, but we're not going to get to any of that new news. I'll just point out that there's been no solution to the mystery drone flap up in the northeast part of the country. And even though it seemed to be spreading to other parts of the country as well, and even overseas over American military bases and other airports, no real solution there as far as any of us have been told. There's been new documents released to John Greenwald's Black Vault on the drone sightings near nuclear facilities. You can find that link over at the Flipboard. And I saw this headline, Coyote causes concerns in Central Austin as pets and poultry vanish. This here in Austin, Texas. And if you go and watch that, you can see what is commonly identified as a coyote with mange during the daytime when you're not usually seeing them unless they're not doing so well. And these Central Austin dwellers who really are in the center of the city. And while there's a lot of wild tracts of land, it's amazing that the coyotes are living right there in the heart of Central Austin. But yeah, if you can see there in the picture is one of these coyotes with mange, which several years back, in fact, was the source of a lot of the quote unquote chupacabras sightings here in Central Texas, also described as Texas blue dogs or the Elmendorf beasts. These being all kinds of different sources probably, but anyway, here nobody's calling them that. They're just coyotes with mange. But a lot of other great news there over at our Flipboard, flipboard.com/@Anomaly Archives. And of course, like I said, at anomalyarchives.org. And as you already likely know, if you don't, we have a Patreon where you can subscribe at various levels on a monthly basis to help us sustain our very low budget and help us get back into a physical location. We have a monthly live online lecture presentation by fellow seekers, researchers, and this month's, the first lecture of 2025 is going to be by Canadian Chris Rutkowski, giving a talk called Abduction Transduction. Chris Rutkowski is no stranger to the Anomaly Archives airwaves. He's been on the show, a part of our Streamathon and part of the Anomaly-NOW show in years past, and always interested in hearing his perspective on things. So I hope that you'll consider signing up for that and tuning in for that live presentation. And then I'll gaining access to the growing back catalog of materials there at our Patreon, and which eventually will wind up over on the anomalyarchives.org website. So lots of news to get through tonight. We're not going to be able to cover all of 2024, but there has been a real wealth of amazing news this past year. Really, I do contend that this has been the year of the drone. I think that seems very obvious, that drones have been a central part of this strange year that we've just put to bed. Also, of course, artificial intelligence has been pretty supreme, but I also recognize that there's been a even greater increase in the mainstreaming of conspiracy theory and conspiracy ideas and conspiracy thinking. For better or worse, probably for worse. And a lot of that has had to do with the investigative reports on things like quote unquote Havana syndrome, or what are now often called AHI, anomalous health incidents. And part of the conspiracy mainstreaming involves the chemtrails conspiracy, weather wars conspiracy, and even drone conspiracies. It's just a rampant part of our society now, and it's not just confined, of course, to the United States, but we really seem to be leading the charge, like I say, for better or worse. But there's also been rumblings of possible first contact with some sort of UFO alien intelligence. These seem to be the main themes that I've picked out over this past year's anomalous headlines. And we'll be diving into a lot of that as we break down the first 3 to 6 months of last year. We'll see how far we get. So let's see. Oh, before we dive in, let's see. Yeah. Okay. So now we're going to start. So with January, I noted that Christopher O'Brien posted this Greater San Luis Valley event log of unusual occurrences over at his website, OurStrangePlanet.com. And this was pretty significant. He put up all these logs from his investigations. He has been researching this phenomena, UFOs and paranormal aspects of cattle mutilations, for decades and decades. He's considered the leading expert on the subject, and so it was pretty noteworthy back at the beginning of the year for him to put so much of this information online over at his website. And this covers the period from 1992 through 2002, as he says, with select pre- and post-period historical cases as well. Great wealth of information over there. And of course, he is one of the people who was pioneering this thing called UFO DAP, that was a device that could monitor the sky, and a la Ray Stanford's Project Starlight International use a instrument package, a set of scientific instruments to monitor the skies and try to record data related to UFOs and paranormal phenomena. Sadly, jumping ahead a little here, we lost Christopher O'Brien in November of last year. He unfortunately had been having long problematic health issues, which led him to a fast and furious drive to the hospital, where he lost control of his vehicle and crashed into a sign for a Church of Christ. And there's a quite humorous picture circulating that friends of his say he would have found humorous. Apparently, the sign was for a Church of Christ, and the T on Christ was broken off. And so in the rubble, it just says Church of Chris. Well, farewell, good brother, and Godspeed. Thank you for all your important work. Well, other things that happened in January, we have the work of Tanner Boyle at his Getting Spooked blog. It may have been his Alien Abduction and Racial Anxiety, Barney Hill and Betty Hill Reexamined Part 1. So Tanner has been blogging over at his Getting Spooked blog for some time, and I only just discovered it like late 2023, early 2024, and this was one of the first things of his I read, and it really caught my attention. The reason I read it was because it's not common for people in the UFO scene to be writing about alien abduction and the issues of racial anxiety. This theme goes back, of course, to the research efforts of my anthropology friend, Susan Lepselter, as well as my other anthropology friend, Steve Mizrak, both of whom were writing about this back in the 1990s and investigating it that far back as well. And one of the things I really like about Tanner's reportage is his taking a parapolitical look at these things. Now, he's written a book about Charles Fort that deals with Fortean, as in Charles Fort, Fortean themes within science fiction. I have not had the pleasure of reading that book yet, but I'm thoroughly enjoying his blog. I highly recommend it. You can find that over at, Tanner F. Boyle, BOYLE.substack.com, or just do a search for Getting Spooked, Tanner Boyle. He's just written a lot about a variety of different UFO paranormal cases. He's even done some stuff on Bigfoot, but it, again, is typically from a parapolitical perspective, but it doesn't discount the possibility that there could be something real there as far as not human machinations and manipulation, though that is the focus. So think about giving it a try. Meanwhile, archives have really had a huge growth in the past year. And really, this goes back the past 4 or 5 years, of course. Back in 2020, we originally were supposed to get the opening of the Archives of the Impossible at Rice University. But for some time, of course, David Marler in Rio Rancho has been developing his archive, his personal archive there. And then over the years, I've been hearing about his incorporating the archives of other great institutions like CUFOS, the Center for UFO Studies, founded by J. Allen Hynek. And he's been coordinating with some of the awesome old timers in the UFO scene who have been accumulating so many records. And so in 2022, he incorporated as a nonprofit and has been working towards getting the archives out of his home and into a permanent or semi-permanent location. And this year has proven to be the year for his endeavors. And so we have news from Space News. A Rio Rancho nonprofit could hold clues to possible UFO existence, as well as other articles about this over at rrobserver.com. Whichever you prefer, UFOs or UAPs, Rio Rancho could be home for Research Center. Again, this was kind of setting the stage for some big news that was going to come about later this year. But basically, Marler's new National UFO Historical Records Center, NUFOHRC, has been building and building and building, and there was some great news coverage leading up to its big news that came later on last year. I don't have any articles to talk about this, but of course there's been lots of famous or now infamous UFO sightings from the I think Iran-Iraq jellyfish video, this military footage of some tentacled Cthulhian thing floating over a town and military base, as well as a triangle sighting by aviation pilot. Ah, yes, there. Thank you, Victor. Very famous piece of footage that people like to talk about and create AI-generated spooky images of. But really, I just come away personally thinking just a weird collection of balloons, party balloons, probably for a wedding or something, but maybe not. Maybe it is an alien that's hovering over an Iraqi military base. Moving right along, the big news, of course, the ongoing quote-unquote disclosure of UAP information via Arrow and its various rotating heads of the organization. These Kirkpatrick controversies. Yes, over at Vice, former Pentagon UFO investigator is pissed because Congress believes in conspiracy theories, and a press release evaluation of the DoD's actions regarding unidentified anomalous phenomena. All of this, again, just continuing what we'd already been hearing in 2023 with the very sensationalized disclosure hearings involving David Grush and his wild claims that are same old, same old. If you've been at this thing for a while, if you've been looking at UFOs, none of this is really that new. And in fact, dang near everything he talks about seemed to be presaged by people like Jacques Vallée in their journals where he talked about this kind of thing. But it has been certainly an amazing and interesting time watching this unfold. I know I often poo-poo this campaign by many people call NIDS 2.0 after Bob Bigelow's National Institute of Discovery Science, and all the same players being involved, such as Austin's own Hal Puthoff. But then people that we hadn't really heard about getting involved and now being there at the front, like Chris Mellon and so many other former past and current military intelligence spooky people. So there's going to be a lot more UFO news, but those were some big things. The thing with, Kirkpatrick, though, he seemed to be a controversy inducing person. While I heard plenty of things that he said that I actually liked and agreed with, he did seem to be striking a tone of confrontation between himself, the government program he was leading, AARO, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, and the UFO community at large. And then, of course, he was making claims about radical UFO people coming to his house and so forth. It's a terrible thing when people are harassed by people with wild beliefs, but and certainly that is part of why conspiracy mongering, conspiracy theories can be so detrimental to actual dialogue and moving forward. But so we had some cryptid news this past year, and this is all just in January. Coast to Coast AM posted video footage from, I think, a YouTube channel about kayakers encounter legendary Argentine lake monster El Majulito. And it's really not, like so much of this, not very spectacular footage, but it's typical in the sense of like I would describe those waters as fairly still, and yet there's something clearly breaking the surface and moving in a way that makes one suspect that there is something there below the surface. Is it just a log that's somehow moving in a way that looks anomalous? Is it eels? My hovercraft is full of them. Or is it something else? But meanwhile, we had over at arstechnica.com, this recurring theme of studies finding Bigfoot sightings correlate with black bear populations. Now, I did not actually think this was a very valid hypothesis. I just have tended to think that most people, even people not familiar with the outdoors and wildlife such as bears, would not mistake a bear for a hairy bipedal hominid. Now, obviously black bears do get up on 2 feet and can walk sometimes very short distances. And I will say that now that I've been watching more trail cam footage and seeing how frequently bears, scratch their backs on tree trunks, and also will just, once up, just kind of walk around a little bit, it seems possible. And if there is this correlation between the sightings and these bear populations, that does tend to kind of give an Occam's razor a likelihood that that's probably what they're seeing if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck. But again, I'm a little skeptical, but then I'm pretty open-minded when it comes to the idea of undiscovered North American hominids. Meanwhile, back to lake monsters, another video, this one from, again, Coast to Coast AM, covering a webcam watcher seeing first virtual Nessie sighting of 2024. I think there were actually some others. But again, it's really this kind of footage. This is why I didn't show it on the show the first time around. It just didn't seem that exciting. But I know that I'm always UFO heavy on the Anomaly-NOW show, and I love cryptozoology. I love the idea of undiscovered creatures and out of place animals and presumed extinct creatures being rediscovered. This is what cryptozoology at its best is all about. And it would be fantastic to make a discovery of significance when it comes to things like lake monsters or North American primates. So I mentioned at the beginning of the show how part of the rise of the mainstreaming of conspiracy theories, even more than they already were, are things like the Havana Syndrome. Well, mystery sounds are a very important aspect of the anomalous. There so many weird encounters, unsurprisingly, if you're someone with a 5 senses or a 6th sense even, there's all those different senses that can come to bear on describing your experience of something anomalous, and sound is one of those. And as somebody who suffered through a bout of mystery low frequency hum sounds, it's something that I have deep respect for. And the Havana Syndrome especially, because like UFO sightings, there seems to be a veil of ridicule surrounding it, and a deliberate disinformation campaign of ridicule on people, and the suggestion that it's just some kind of mass hysteria or contagion. Not mass really, but that it's not, there's no there. Well, over at fox13news.com, mysterious bass sound in South Tampa resurfaces. Residents raise money to investigate noise. Other reports you can find online. We have, I think, linked to we will link to the YouTube video of that. But this may be nothing. It could be a industrial foundry. It could be some kind of machinery or large HVAC system. All of these things are the kinds of things that when I was dealing with my experience, and so often when others are dealing with these experiences, they look for those kinds of things. There's so many ways, so many potential sources for anomalous sounds, mystery hums, that sort of thing. But yeah, we'll provide the links to all the stuff in the show notes, which, of course, if you didn't already know, you can find over at anomalyarchives.org, where we have a separate page for every show's episode with as many of the links to the news covered as possible. Well, gosh, okay, finally, it's only taken not quite half an hour to get through, about 20 minutes to get through January. On to February 2024, we have news out of the nextgov.com. National Archives tease up new rules for UFO records. And I think this is all part of the new UAP-oriented legislation that was requiring all the agencies, all the government organizations to collect all their UFO UAP information for depositing publicly and into one central location last year in October. I don't think they really met that, and they changed the rule so that they just kind of had no firm deadline. But yeah, from the article, Congress wants to know what agencies know about UFOs, and under a new law, agencies have to tell them. New records management provisions included in the recently enacted 2024 Defense Policy Bill require federal agencies to organize and tag records related to what the government calls unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAP. And that over at nextgov.com. So the other part of the mainstreaming of conspiracy theories, and, hey, UFOs, UAP, that's the whole point of that bill, is because there's been this clamor from the public saying, you're lying to us. You're covering up the truth. You're corrupt, and we can't trust you. And so tell us the truth, which seems like paradoxical. Like, you're lying to us. Tell me the truth. Well, what other choice do we have but to try to dig out those documents? But the other half of this year, I think, has been, again, the mainstreaming of conspiracy theories, in largely to do with weather modification, weather warfare, and of course the old chemtrail conspiracy. And this article from the olivepress.es, stop complaining about chemtrails. Prosecutor in Spain insists the visible vapor from planes is not toxic after being inundated with denunciations from conspiracy theorists. And this is something that recurred a lot this past year around the world, not just in the United States, where people are increasingly concerned about those things they're seeing in the sky. Not drones, but lines of vapor coming from behind aircraft up in the sky. And this other article, what is this, over at Coast to Coast, Spanish prosecutor laments rise in chemtrail reports from residents. Now, the chemtrail conspiracy theory goes back to at least the late 1990s and perhaps earlier to the mid 1990s, or maybe even the early 1990s. I'm not sure when it first happened, but of course, anybody who's followed history knows that governments and their militaries have gotten their hands dirty with chemical and biological warfare, and that almost always involves the spraying, the releasing of some kind of gas. And so when people see things coming out of aircraft that they are not familiar with or understand how these things work, it's easy to jump to conclusions. And that seems to be one of the main things happening here, a la the drone flap in the Northeast. People start looking up, and lo and behold, they see things that they don't recognize. I've said this past year, I think, or maybe it was the year before, how I was seeing an increase of people online, social media, posting pictures of what was obviously just vapor trails behind planes, but where they're on the horizon at such an angle that the sun is hitting them just right, and it looks like a fireball. And so we see all these reports of people saying, oh, there was this fireball going through the sky, but it didn't move very fast like a real fireball would. And some people do not take too kindly to being explained that no, that's something normal. And I've seen plenty of examples of it where I thought that does look odd. Like I'd see 5 of them almost in a star shape on the horizon, but it's just 5 aircraft going west. Now, other aspects of the anomalous are the powers of the mind, and this is one of the areas that I think is the most exciting. Human potential. What is the human body and the human mind capable of? And it really, time and time again, we come away with the evidence that the mind can override the body. This one from mindmatters.ai. Hall of Mirrors, the many ways consciousness baffles researchers, is a nice introduction to just some of those things where we just do not understand the nature of consciousness. Consciousness is, as a now past a scientist friend of mine used to say, is a wastebasket term. It's so overused, consciousness and quantum and these things that we don't really, we throw them around like we understand them, but we really don't. Gravity. But there's so many ways that we can improve our health and our mind by trying to better understand our minds and our bodies and how they interrelate. This other article from, consciousnessunbound.blogspot.com, what our minds can do to our bodies. Again, it is amazing how breathing, something as simple as breathing, which we all take for granted because thankfully we have these autonomic processes that do it for us without us having to think about it. And in fact, some of the worst debilitating things that we as humans have to deal with as health effects of getting old and having problems like dementia and Alzheimer's is the body suddenly forgetting how to do that, just flipping a switch and forgetting to breathe. These are scary things, but it's another side of this is the research in hypnosis. Again, something that people don't really, we still really don't understand fully. It seems like this really powerful thing, and yet it really just comes down to words. The ability for someone to make somebody relaxed enough to follow their voice and do things that they wouldn't necessarily normally do. Not only that, but to help them make their body do things that they wouldn't normally do, whether it's quitting smoking, or in some cases, I love these reports of experiments where people under hypnosis are brushed with something that they are not allergic to, but they're told it's something they're allergic to, and their body develops a rash or blisters as if the skin was touched by something that they are known to actually be allergic to. These are fantastical powers of the mind. It's wild stuff, and that's why consciousness research is so important. Another article that we covered this in February of 2024, lucid dreaming breakthrough achieved as researchers report successful control of a virtual object while sleeping. Now, we reported on similar articles throughout 2024 about these experiments. I was so excited to hear this. This one, of course, the article's over at thedebrief.org, Micah Hanks's news, science and news site. These researchers are doing great stuff. It's pretty amazing how much lucid dream research seems to be back in vogue, and it seems tied to these tech companies that seem obsessed with the ability of people being conscious in the dream state and manipulating the waking state. Shades of Minority Report to the movie based on the book by Philip K. Dick. Okay, some slew of interesting things from February. Archaeology and out of place, quote unquote, animals. From, what is this, geekreporter.com. Homo sapiens used bow and arrow 40,000 years earlier than thought. Wow. See, this is the thing about archaeology and anomalous science, frontier physics, fringe science, bleeding edge research. We're constantly finding evidence for human civilization being pushed back further and further. All these things that, we thought were recent evolutions, advances, discoveries by humanity turn out to have been with us for so much longer. And these are the kinds of things that lead one to go, are we being told the truth? How all these experts, do they really know? It's all a best guess. It's intermediatism, as the Fortean should tell you. Another one over at texasmonthly.com. Most dinosaur tracks are hidden on private land at Government Canyon. You can stroll alongside them. I've been wanting to go to a Government Canyon outside San Antonio for a long time. And just in the past couple of months, my wife and I finally got to go. And we had a great time. We did just over a 6-mile hike and very easy terrain. And we got to see these tracks. And I will say they're not quite as exciting as I would have hoped. But still, they're the kinds of things like if you have to take them at their word that they know, that the people claiming that these are dinosaur tracks know what they're talking about, because if you're an untrained eye, I don't know that most of us would recognize these little dips in the rock in this creek bed. But I believe them. Some of them looked like weird reptilian prints. But yeah, whether that wasn't the main reason we went there, it was mainly just to go on a nice hike, and we had a very nice time. And in fact, the trail where you see the dinosaur tracks in the creek bed is up against a cliff face, which on our way back, we didn't realize, we hadn't really looked at the map that closely, but on the way back, the trail goes on along the top of the ridge of that cliff. And so we got to see from above where we were earlier. And there's a beautiful view, even though that time of year, most of the foliage is already off the trees, but it's still nice. So that's at Government Canyon. Recommended, just outside of San Antonio. Meanwhile, more out of place animals. Kangaroo spotted at Texarkana Park. Police respond. This at ketk.com. When I reported on this last year, I of course mentioned the fact that there was a baby kangaroo or a little roo seen in our neighborhood a couple of years back. That's pretty crazy. That's, of course, just people having exotic pets, not really something I advocate. But I mean, gosh, if we got a wild population of kangaroos in Texas, well, first of all, there'd be lots of hunting of them, just like there has been historically in Australia, because they just kind of take over. Oh, see, moving right along, scientists announced discovery of a very strange 240 million year old quote unquote Chinese dragon fossil. This at abcnews.go.com. And then over at fox4news.com, shark fossils from Alabama and Kentucky National Park lead to discovery of a new species. Pretty cool stuff. Now, back, and I know I'm jumping all over the place, but that's going to be how it is. Sorry. But back to the rising paranoia and conspiracy going even more mainstream, we have this article that was the first I'd heard about this show being in production that's about the octopus Inslaw conspiracy that was discovered by, oh gosh, now I'm missing his name. Gosh, but it's what's the saddest thing, and I did report on this. This is, of course, over at yahoo.com, reproducing some other news outlet. But as I said at the time, I really enjoyed this series that is being reported here. But the sad thing is it's so clear that they were working off of the research of, is it Danny Casolaro? But the book was published posthumously by fellow researcher Ken Thomas, who we, of course, lost in the last couple of years. And they never mention his name. They never mention the name of Ken Thomas in that series, despite the fact that they showed the researchers at the university that Ken taught at and where he donated his materials. But I still really enjoyed that series and highly recommend it. He uncovered a rogue CIA conspiracy, then he was found dead. Now, jumping back to mysterious hums, Havana Syndrome, but also occult audio, the inquisitive beauty of paranormal sound. This is an interesting article over at Bandcamp, where they've got this feature by Luis Pattison and all these different samples of audio. One of them says here, this fragment of audio recorded at an airfield in Norfolk, England in 1980 is just one of many collected on Spectra Ex Machina, a sound anthology of occult phenomena, 1920 to 2017, a compilation series collecting examples of paranormal sound. Whether you're a believer or a skeptic or somewhere in between, there's something unsettling about a recording like this that demands further engagement. Is it a hoax, a joke, a malfunction of technology, or something genuinely otherworldly? Listen more closely and you may find yourself questioning not just your ears, but the nature of sound itself. And there's other samples from this, including a seance with Elvis. He's still alive, so how can they have a seance with him? Okay. Hey, we made it through February. Zooming into March, more Aero and UFO UAP news, where the DoD discounts sightings of extraterrestrial technology. Surprise! Defense.gov reporting on this, the disclosure movement. Oh, yes. The 63-page report on the historical record of U.S. government involvement with unidentified anomalous phenomena. That's right, folks. March marked the release of the first part of Arrow's historical report. That report that I and everybody else just lambasted. I mean, there may have been a couple of interesting things in there, but my gosh, it's so bad. And it's the kind of thing that just furthers people's distrust of the government, specifically this new office, Arrow, the all domain anomaly resolution office. And yeah, I'm not going to recapitulate all the criticism of it, but suffice to say, yes, it's a crap report. It's really just really poorly done. And hopefully the second part I don't see how it could be any worse. Meanwhile, we see the rise of retired Rear Admiral Gallaudet. That's Gallaudet. And he put out this white paper, Beneath the Surface. We may learn more about UAP by looking in the ocean. Rear Admiral Tim Guyette, PhD, U.S. Navy, retired. This was Volume 1, Number 1, March 2024. This was actually, I guess, submitted or circulated in July 2023, but the Saul Foundation started putting out these white papers as part of this ongoing effort of theirs to further UAP, UFO legislation and governmental and scientific and integration of projects, that sort of thing. Of course, this is all the effort of Gary Nolan and Peter Scoffish. And of course, at the end of 2023 is when they launched their first annual conference. And then, of course, they would have another one last year, but that's months to come. Moving right along. Oh, yes, Chris Rutkowski, who, as I mentioned, is going to be our January 2025 presenter for the Anomaly Archives Academy. He published his results of the 2023 Canadian UFO survey. Of course, he collects all the Canadian UFO reports and reports on their findings every year. Of course, that takes a lot of time. So, not surprisingly, it was March when he released that. And that could be found over at the aptly named CanadianUFOReport.com. And also there you can find links to his essay, The Canadian UFO Survey, as well as the WinnipegSun.com reported Manitoba had its share of UFO sightings reported last year, and where it makes reference to Rutkowski and the survey over there. Now, shifting from UFOs to other unidentified flying what's-its. Again, I think March marks the beginning of the 2024 year of the drone. We have this article from the WarZoneTWZ.com. Mysterious drones swarmed Langley Air Force Base for weeks. Of course, now we know, and really we've known for a long time. Anybody, again, who's looked at UFO reports historically knows that military bases have always had large numbers of UFO sightings around them. And again, this may have nothing to do, I would say it most certainly does not have most things to do with quote unquote UFOs and when the idea of alien intelligences, but that could be part of it, especially when you factor in the nuclear sightings. But yeah, this article was just one of many that really signaled that this story was going to level up in the public's perception. I think anybody with a lick of sense gets a little nervous when you start hearing that the military bases that are supposed to be there to protect us are being inundated with things that they can't identify and that they allegedly don't know where they're coming from. And if it's hobbyists, that's pretty bad. If it's a foreign adversary, that's really bad. And if it's aliens, well, that could be really bad, but it also is just like, what the heck? I don't think it's aliens. And yes, bad ufology, bad boy. Yes, we've got a number of cases this year of people in the UFO scene, in the UFO community, who do bad things. And this one was a surprise to me, going, of course, to talk about, his name is eluding me, Joseph Firmage, right? Yeah. And a 90s teen tech whiz turned exec is accused of elder abuse amid Ponzi allegations. Again, like I've said, so much of what's news again was reported in Jacques Vallée's Forbidden Science journals. And Joe Firmage was a Mormon who had a very wealthy Mormon who had a bedroom visitation experience that I would summarize as probably like a ball of light morphing into a, angel of light kind of thing, or an alien of light. But yeah, some bad reports of his abusing an old person and defrauding them of money from this Axios.com article, Forbes listed him among 13, quote, masters of the new universe alongside Jeff Bezos and Jerry Yang in a 1998 profile of tech executives. By 1999, US Web was valued at $2.5 billion. Around that time, he stepped down as CEO after he said an extraterrestrial visitor appeared in his bedroom and he began evangelizing beliefs in human contact with space aliens. I believe I saw him speak at the National UFO Conference in San Antonio in 1999. And that's the only time I had any kind of close proximity to him. But yes, as a very wealthy person who'd had a strange encounter, he started spending money trying to do UFO frontier science research. But then this other article from KSL.com, Utah entrepreneur facing federal lawsuit is charged with financially exploiting 80-year-old woman. And this is something that, and I don't know the details of this case, but this idea of fraudsters in the UFO scene just comes up time and time again. I know there's a lot of people who have noticed the weird convergence of cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, etc. type promoters in the UFO scene and weird, very dodgy scenarios being promoted by some of those same people. Now, still continuing on here in March. Gosh, we're not going to get very far, are we? More rise of the Anomalous Archives over at theobservermagazine.substack.com, which I highly recommend as a paranormal UFO related website. 50 million UFO documents, books, and magazines later, 50 years of the AFU, that's the Archives for the Unexplained, over in Sweden. They've been around for 50 years and have accumulated so much stuff. As I love what they're doing. They have been such an inspiration. They are what inspired me to form this nonprofit, and the desire to preserve UFO related material, but also paranormal and other anomalous type material. And they have been doing it the longest, and they are the biggest and best archive like that on the planet. And unfortunately, they're sucking up all the good stuff. No, that's not true. They're helping preserve so much stuff. It is amazing how much material. Klaus Vaughn is a working machine. He just goes everywhere and just gets all the stuff. But a lot of it also is going to places like the Rice University, Archives of the Impossible, Jeff Kripal's baby, and that's amazing. And that's right here in Texas. I'm so proud of them. And then over next door in New Mexico, there's not just the UFO Museum in Roswell. There's the archive in UFO HRC of David Marler and others in Rio Rancho, Albuquerque. Okay, archaeology, anomalous, ? And out of place animals. Oh yes, right. Online photo of tiger allegedly spotted at San Antonio Park is fake. Here's how we know. This one from Kens5.com. Yes, there were some. This happens fairly regularly, and in fact, my friend Chester Moore over at his highercalling.net website, A Tiger at Lake Livingston, or was it in Bossier City, talks about how this seems to be a recurring hoax amongst social media outlets. For some reason, people just keep recycling this idea of a tiger on the loose, which always makes me think of some very funny scenes in a couple of movies that I like. They're very stupid movies, but they're still very funny. Meanwhile, over at smithsonianmag.com, strange new prehistoric bird discovered in China and named for David Attenborough. The proto-bird lived some 120 million years ago and did not have teeth. Well, yeah. Don't most birds not have teeth? I guess the ones that far back did. I'm not that up on my ancient birds. David Attenborough. Oh my gosh, what an amazing person. And what an amazing bird. Okay, over at sciencealert.com, the largest creature of all time, quote unquote, may have been a physical impossibility. Yeah, I know that there's always been people, conspiracy theories maybe, who speculate that dinosaurs are fake. They didn't exist. I mean, this is like the spiritual conspiracy, and makes me think of a routine by my favorite deceased comedian, stand-up comic Bill Hicks, the idea of a mischievous god planting fake dinosaur bones just to mess with humanity. Yes. Last year, paleontologists discovered the fossil of a 39 million year old extinct whale in Peru that appeared to defy the limits of vertebrate size. The team behind the lucky find estimated Parasutus colossus body mass to be somewhere between 85 and 340 tons, but at 17 to 20 meters in length, around 56 to 65 feet, this would have made the animal impossibly dense, argue paleontologists Ryosuke Motani and Nicholas Biensen, who were not involved in the initial discovery. Quote, "It would have been a job for the whale to stay at the surface or even to leave the sea bottom. It would have required continuous swimming against gravity to do anything in the water," says Motani from the University of California, Davis. Yeah. There's more to that at the sciencealert.com website. And let's see. New study shows one of the world's rarest whales likes to hang out near Texas. Well, who doesn't? Well, a lot of people don't, actually, but that's over at chron.com. That's chron.com. That's the Houston Chronicles newspaper's website. And meanwhile, 500-pound mound of pythons found in Florida marsh. Now, oh my God, that's such a creepy image. This one's at kxan.com, one of our local news affiliates here in Austin. A team of trackers found 500 pounds of snake in a South Florida marsh last month. Now maybe this is what keyed me into it, but I've heard, and maybe you have too, that like people come across these dens of snakes, these pits of snakes where they're just a roiling mass of snakiness, basically having a little orgy. I think that's what's going on. Maybe I'm wrong. I think it's some kind of reproductive thing. Anyway, that one's over at kxan.com. And, PBS on their YouTube channel released this interesting video on Texas Bigfoot, black bears in Seminole Canyon. You can watch that over at their YouTube channel. Enjoy that. And they show the wonderful Bigfoot statue, which I, of course, have my picture taken in front of there in Jefferson, Texas, the Bigfoot capital of this state of ours. Yeah. Oh, there's the black bear Bigfoot connection, maybe. Anyway, lots of great stuff. I enjoy watching the TPW, Texas Parks and Wildlife Nature Channel. That is the PBS channel, but I'm sure it was done in coordination with them. All right, back to Mystery Hums and the Havana Syndrome over at WashingtonPost.com. In a NIH probe of Havana Syndrome finds no sign of brain injuries. And this is where the news on this is just so paradoxical. So we've got researchers like this one last name Bartholomew, who has written a lot of great stuff, but he's written a book against the Havana Syndrome, saying it's all just delusion and contagion, mind contagion, basically. And you've got these reports saying that there's no signs of injuries, and that's why these people are struggling with trying to get some kind of medical help. And it seems pretty clear that they legitimately are experiencing some health issues that have some sort of source. And while, again, the power of the mind can do all kinds of things, so perhaps it's like placebo. You convince yourself that you've had the drug, or you convince yourself that you've been exposed to something, and you have some negative reaction, like I was describing with the hypnosis and the blistering and that sort of thing. But then we've got these other reports, and I don't know if I have them in this, which month it came in, but there's a number of other reports that seem to indicate there's good evidence that this is part of some KGB psychotronic warfare, or the side effect of a surveillance operation of some sort of these state officials, the United States and otherwise. Again, Havana Syndrome being a misnomer because not all of these incidents happen in Cuba. But yeah. Now, something I can highly recommend that isn't about that, but that's definitely related, is this wonderful YouTube channel. I really like this guy's YouTube channel. I'm blanking on his name, but he put out this fantastic mini documentary. It's just over 30 minutes on the mystery hum. It's called The Controversial Sound Only 2% of People Hear. And I highly recommend this. If you have any interest in the mystery hum and trying to come to terms with mysterious sounds that maybe you and only a few other people can hear, this is one of the better researchers into that. And interestingly enough, he even touches on one of the more rare hypotheses put forth by my friends Steve Kohlhase, what Kohlhase calls the GPS, gas pipeline syndrome. This idea that the noise is actually caused by the sound of the fluid, the gas, the air, that like natural gas that's pumped all around the country, all around the world in these pipelines, and that can, if it's not done just right, create these resonances, these sounds that some people can hear and can cause significant disruption to their sleep cycles, their physiology, cause all kinds of problems. And it's mentioned in this little documentary by, what's his name? Is it Ben Jordan? Or am I getting that name wrong? Can't quite make it out. Yeah, Ben Jordan. Yeah, and I love this guy's channel, and there's so much other information. He's a musician, a keyboardist, a tinkerer. I highly recommend this guy's channel for all kinds of stuff, and not least of which is to tell us why we should all stop using the streaming music services that we use, because they're screwing over the artists so terribly. Anyway, moving right along, is over at wired.com, why you hear voices in your white noise machine. This is another phenomenon that some people are familiar with, and I've heard since I was really young, this idea that sometimes people, like in snowstorms, would hear their voice being called, their name being called, or hear voices, and somehow the snow, that sound of snow falling is kind of creates a white noise kind of effect. And I think it's just, I don't know that this is the explanation offered in this article, but I think it's possibly just as simple as pareidolia, or just whenever, just like simulacra, and like looking at an old broadcast station that's gone off the air that's just static, you start to see patterns. And that's not to say that there may actually sometimes be patterns there, but just like looking at the clouds and seeing animals and other shapes. But in this case, it's auditory phenomenon that likely stir all kinds of primal archetypal experiences, like somebody calling your name. What? Oh, no, nobody's there. Back to bad ufology. Follow up on Firmage. Joe Firmage again. Joseph Firmage files obtained from SLCPD. This is from our friends over at expandingfrontiersresearch.org. Records responsive to Joseph Paramore, what a middle name, Paramore, Firmage, were obtained Sunday from the Salt Lake City Police Department. Law enforcement reports reflect circumstances and charges surrounding his 2023 arrest for financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. As reported by KSL, Firmage was accused of neglecting an 80-year-old woman, including leaving her without utilities while trying to take care of her finances and assets, which included her home. And there's the PDFs to those reports can be found there, and some more explication of that case. That's so sad. All right. Well, let's move into April and see how far we get. Okay. Yes, we move into April and we start the Arrow he said, she said controversy. Did Grush really try to meet with Arrow? And of course, over at, that would be John Greenwald's Black Vault YouTube channel, FOIA documents reveal Arrow's authorized and repeated attempts to engage with David Grush. Now, if I remember correctly, basically what this seemed to indicate from the documents that Greenwald was able to obtain, that despite Grush saying he had tried to meet with Arrow officials, that apparently they say otherwise, and that it seemed like he was almost deliberately trying not to meet with them. Again, I would hate to be misrepresenting this from my not always perfect memory, but that was kind of the takeaway that I had from, if I remember correctly, from this video and this report. And of course, I'm sure over at the Black Vault website, John Greenwald's got all the linked documents that he obtained through, as he always does, his copious FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act requests. What else happened in April? Oh, yes. The total eclipse of the mind. The eclipse. That Austin was pretty much right in the path. And I've seen some eclipses in my life, but this was the first total eclipse I ever saw. And it was fantastic. It was amazing. I'm so privileged to have seen this. I was home that day, and even though it was overcast, it was just amazing. So even though it was overcast, the clouds, I swear, it was just, and I've had several friends had this same experience where they thought they weren't going to be able to see anything, and that it was just way too overcast. Well, the clouds parted enough. I don't know, but I got to see it. I got to witness it. And sure enough, like it was a full eclipse. I was able to look at it without the glasses. I was being careful, but yes, I got to look at it without and it was, oh my God, it was amazing. It was really great. If you ever had the chance, take it. And I hope many of you had the opportunity to experience that this past year in April of 2024. Meanwhile, over on YouTube, there's a video interview with Dr. Greg Little about his solar eclipse at Ancient Mound Sites survey, where he was trying to do some research. And I know our volunteer Victor and company were trying to promote some good, fun science with surrounding the solar eclipse opportunity. But of course, at the same time, there was, as reported by RollingStone.com, brain worms. The far right is crawling with eclipse conspiracy theories. Everyone has lost their god dang minds, by E.J. Dixon, April 4th, 2024. Yeah, there were all kinds of ideas posted about, again, the typical New World Order takeover, right? Masonic rituals planned worldwide to usher in a New World Order. In another eclipse tweet posted on March 26, which had 3.8 million views, Jones included a video of a man speculating that various Texas and Oklahoma counties had declared a state of emergency in order to usher in a billionaire-led New World Order. It is indeed true that a number of counties, including Texas's Travis County and Oklahoma's McMurton County, have issued disaster warnings prior to the eclipse, but it does not appear to be for the nefarious reasons suggested by Jones. Rather, it appears to be for the intended purpose of the government, quote, to adopt public safety initiatives that protect people from harm. For instance, according to Travis County Declaration of Local Disaster, the county anticipates an influx of thousands of tourists to watch the eclipse, thereby leading to extreme traffic congestion, something we already have, but it can always get worse, and potential telephone service disruptions. Yeah. I think, as always, at the same time, as we conspiracy theorists would say, certain forces will never let a good crisis go to waste. Okay. Jumping over to the oceans, USOs rise from the depths, and rise of retired Rear Admiral Gaide. Again, former naval officer raises alarm about world-changing underwater UFO captured on video. This from news.yahoo.com. Probably reproduced from either NPR or somewhere else. I'm not really sure. But yes, Gaide continued to get news coverage, and he's going to make a pretty big appearance later on in the year, but we'll get to that at some point. Meanwhile, this very interesting video surfaced. Watch, eerie glowing USO spotted by a research vessel in the Gulf of America. Oh, sorry, Gulf of Mexico. And a research boat doing science involving bioluminescence in the ocean came across some weird glowing thing. And it's interesting footage and a nice little article there you might want to check out. That's at coasttocoastam.com. Meanwhile, again, the rise of paranoia and conspiracy going even more mainstream, and this time with the weather wars. Tennessee lawmakers vote to ban geoengineering with allusions to chemtrails, conspiracy theory. Now, on the one hand, I don't know, very mixed feelings about this, because obviously I don't think lawmakers should be passing legislation for things that they don't even know whether it's really happening or not, and they don't think it is happening. And at the same time, there is lots of real geoengineering discussion and research going on, and it is very controversial. This is something, again, that we've reported on over and over again, not just this past year, but throughout my decades-long news reporting on these kinds of topics. Meanwhile, there was a spat of conspiracy theorizing related to the floods in Dubai. No, Dubai floods weren't caused by cloud seeding. And again, cloud seeding is still done in the United States. It's done here in Texas, as I reported in that month's news on the Anomaly-NOW show. Meanwhile, meteorologist warns of weather wars between countries. This from Newsweek.com. Senior forecaster says cloud seeding could lead to unintended consequences when technology is deployed. Yeah, that's, again, what's always been the issue. Cloud seeding is always, and weather modification in general has always been controversial, because if you have a desert or a drought-stricken area and you're trying to induce weather changes there to get you more water, more rain, you're taking it from somewhere else. It's a closed system, folks. So it's if you're doing something one place, it's going to have, as they say, unintended consequences elsewhere. Here is where the Havana Syndrome stuff really heated up. CBSNews.com reports Russian nexus revealed during 60 Minutes Havana Syndrome investigation into potential attacks on U.S. officials. Also over at the INS.press, undercover chef, how the FBI interrogator of a Russian spy arrested in Florida later came down with Havana Syndrome. And these are all indicators, according to these reports, that there's real evidence for some kind of spy ring from Russia using this kind of psychoacoustic, psychotronic, electromagnetic, or some type of technology. Again, possibly for surveillance that has an unintended consequence of these bad health effects for people. Over at Newsweek.com, Havana Syndrome mystery solved, Putin spies tied to the U.S. diplomatic attacks. A lot of great reportage there. And what are we going to make of this? The paradox of there's no evidence. It's psycho-contagion. No, it's real. The rise of the Anomalous Archives again, this time with Rice University in Houston. A decade of discovery, 10 years of Rice University's Archives of the Impossible. Now, again, I commented that this seems kind of silly to me. It only opened in 2024. They were originally going to open in 2020. But yes, as far back as 2014, Jacques Vallée started coordinating with Jeff Kripal and Rice University to donate his archives. Thank you, Jacques, for like you are, being a preservationist, somebody interested in helping people not have to reinvent the wheel, and archiving and preserving ufological history, especially your great work and thinking. And lastly, for April, we have another case of out-of-place animals. This time it was back here in Austin. Emus safely caught after running loose in Zilker Park. Again, too many exotic animals. Texas is so filled with exotic animals. There's just, if you drive cross country across Texas, it'll take you at least 8 hours to go from border to border. you will see so many high fences, and on the other sides of those fences, you might see all kinds of caribou or other or emus or other exotic animals that are on these different ranches, and some of them can leap very high, and that's why they have to have these really tall fences. Okay, well, so we've gotten through the first 4 months. I'm going to have to trim down for the next episode, but I'm going to say this will be part 1 of our year-end review. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope there's information that we didn't cover that you hadn't heard about. We'll provide the links in the show notes. That'll probably all be up tomorrow. And I just want to thank you for tuning in. Really appreciate you all taking the time, and I hope you'll like and subscribe, all that goofy algorithm stuff. So, and consider becoming a member of the Anomaly Archives Patreon, and you can go to patreon.com/Anomaly Archives. And coming up this month, we've got Chris Rutkowski presenting on the subject abduction, transduction. And of course, Chris Rutkowski is a Canadian professor and researcher who's been working in this field of UFOs and anomalous phenomena and Bigfoot, cryptozoology, paranormal stuff for decades and decades. And I think he's got a very learned perspective. He's very skeptical, but I think he thinks that there is something there and it's worth investigating, even as frustrating as it is when we can disprove this, that, or the other. But all right, well, that's going to be it for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us, and peace out, y'all. Be good to each other and have fun, and we'll see you next week.